Hello friends, Adam here with FED. So I've talked about permadeath a lot on the channel. It's one of my favorite topics. It's really just an enjoyable thing to me, and it makes Fire Emblem so unique from other SRPGs. But I feel like the series as a whole is moving away from it, and you could even make the argument that Three Houses was meant to be played on casual mode rather than classic, the way it was designed. Now, without permadeath, Fire Emblem needs something else to incentivize the player to keep units alive, and I have a few thoughts on how to do this. I have four different examples I want to go over that I think could be a good replacement. And some of these are inspired by other games, some of these I just thought of or improved upon other games, things like that. So, but of course, leave your thoughts in the comments on any of these or any ideas you have. If Fire Emblem were to get rid of permadeath, how would you keep the tension or incentivize the player to keep units alive rather than just losing them forever? Because that's a problem that I have with Dark Deity, which is a Fire Emblem-like that was released recently that doesn't have permadeath. If a character dies, they just lose 10% of a singular stat, which feels like kind of a slap on the wrist compared to what Fire Emblem does when a unit dies, where it's like really devastating, honestly. So let's get into it. So my first example, make dead units or units who die in a chapter unavailable the next chapter. Now this might be the harshest thing outside of just like straight up death that I could put into a game myself. So just replace permadeath with this. The game would need to be made with this in mind. Like, obviously dead characters should be expected, keeping everyone alive should be a tremendous feat kind of thing, where death is like almost a certainty, which in war makes sense. That's one thing with Fire Emblem I always think is kind of goofy. Keeping all your units alive, you know, especially like Three Houses, is kind of seen as the norm. Whereas, you know, in like a real life situation, people are just, that's not how war works. And I also think stats would need to be far less important than they are in recent Fire Emblem games. Something akin to 3776, or even, I'd even say, you know, FE3, so Mystery of the Emblem, just where stat caps aren't as high. You can raise them with stat boosters, or essentially it comes down to weapons are more important. Having special weapons that only certain characters can use to make them more unique. Things like that. I think that is more important than, should be more important than stats in this scenario. So that if a unit dies and you're not available in the next chapter to gain experience and gain, you know, get level ups and gain stats, it's not as big. It doesn't ruin that character for the rest of the playthrough. You just don't get to use it in the next chapter. So I think of a character like Orson or Othin or Ocean or O'Shane or however you say it from FE5, 3776, where his stats, they're pretty good, right? But there are other people with better stats than him, but he's so good because of his skills, and by skills I mean skill, he has Wrath, and because of his personal weapon, the Poogie, Bouge, Vogue, whatever it's called now. That's just like a 1-2 range killer axe that with 60 uses. Really, really good weapon, like one of the best weapons in the game. Just really, really good. And I think that would need to be the case here if you're going to do that. There would also need to be smaller deployments for maps, making it so that if a unit had died and you, like, essentially if you let too many units die, you would still have enough to deploy to have a full deployment on the next chapter. Or in place of that, you could also just have a lot of playable units to make up for this. I feel this could be a rather elegant solution to getting rid of permadeath while still punishing the player for losing a unit. Death would still be impactful, but you would not lose your favorite units over time. You just wouldn't lose your favorite units forever, and I think that is something that people would appreciate. But hey, you're still incentivized to keep them alive. Okay, so number 2, make losing all your units in battle a real possibility. This reminds me of a game like XCOM, where you go in with small squads, small 4-man squads for the most part, and there's a real possibility that they'll all die. And I feel like it's accomplished by having low HP values, smaller squads, like I said, and also having enemies that are on par with your player units. Like, they are either on par or close to it. They're almost just as threatening as you are to them. So it requires you just to play smarter. So I think if Fire Emblem could adapt this with, again, the smaller squads, smaller maps, and then just have really scary enemies that are, or just enemies that are on par with your units, So often in Fire Emblem, every enemy you fight is just like this grunt that their stats are just complete trash compared to yours. It could be interesting to make it so that enemies and player units alike are similar statistically. That's a hard word to say. All right, number 3, reducing stats on death. You know, Dark Deity does this. And I talked about how I don't think the consequences is enough. It's pretty negligible in most cases. But I think to make this work, you just need to make it harsher. Make it so letting a character die is like a huge setback for them, rather than being, oh no, they lost 2 mastery, or oh no, they lost 2 defense. Like, yeah, it sucks, but you can deal with that. You know what I mean? You can work with that. But what I want it to be pretty bad. I want it to be one of 2 things. Maybe remove all levels and stats that were gained in that chapter, which if you die early on, it's not a big deal, but you also just miss out on level ups. But like, say you have a unit that gained 5 level ups in a chapter. If they die, they lose all that progress. And I think that would be a really interesting thing, especially when you're trying to train like a weaker unit, trying to train them up or something, and that happens. That's almost cause to reset if you really want to use that unit in the future. I think that'd be interesting. And then the other side of it is to do something more like Dark Deity, where you just reduce the level. Well, first off, you just reduce like all the stats on death, make maybe -1 to every stat, or maybe even -2 to every stat, based on how you want to do it, and also reduce their level. In Fire Emblem, it's not talked about very often, but more often than not, aside from maybe a few games, maybe 3 Houses doesn't apply as much, but in older Fire Emblems, and those are the ones that I've played the most at this point, I would say the most important stat up until you promote is your level. So that's something that Dark Deity really misses out on, is you lose stats, but your level stays the same. But if you were to reduce your level on death, that would be pretty big. It means you wouldn't promote as soon, so you wouldn't get those stat boosts or special skills that come along with the class that you're trying to get to. And also just make you weaker overall by having some of your stats decrease. So I think that would be a really interesting way to incentivize the player to keep people alive. And now, final example, number 4. I would want to reward units who don't die. So I think this could be a combo, kind of work with other ones, but make it so that keeping your units alive doesn't just like keep them around or keep them the same. Make it so it actively makes them better, and if they do die, they lose some bonuses. But these bonuses can be like compiled over time if you keep them alive for a long time. So like having a living streak just adds stats. So I would have to sit down and really think about how to do this, or if I were making my own game, which I'm not, or probably never will, I'd have to really think about it. But say a unit survives 5 maps in a row on the get to the 6th map, maybe they're getting +1 to every stat, or maybe +2 to every stat, or maybe they have 5 points that they can divvy out to each stat or something. But if they die, then they lose all those bonuses and have to start from square 1. They don't lose any levels or any of their base stats per se, but they would lose those bonuses, and that could be really interesting. I think positive reinforcement is generally better than negative, so I really like this idea in particular. And to make it all work, though, I think enemies would need to be terrifying, and death would need to be a common occurrence. It shouldn't be the norm to keep all your units alive at this point for this to work. Otherwise, you're just going to be running around with some really beefed up units, right? So death should be common. But anyways, those are just some of my thoughts on how I might replace permadeath. I think there's a lot of interesting ways to go about this. I even have a smaller idea that it's kind of half baked, so I didn't include it. About maybe making it so like units have, like every unit has like map specific objectives or something. So if they die, you miss out on like a special item or something at the end of the chapter. Stuff like that could be really interesting as well. But that's kind of a half-baked idea, and I didn't really think through it too much, but it could be cool. But anyways, thanks for watching. Make sure to like the video before you leave. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We just crossed 15,000 subs recently. That was cool, so thank you so much. And of course, like I said earlier, comment your thoughts. How would you change permadeath, or what would you add in place of permadeath in a future Fire Emblem game? I'm super curious to hear what you guys have to say on this. And again, thank you so much for watching. It means the world. Until next time, have a good one.